Hey, can you hear me? Is this mic on?
Recording in progress.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, good. All right. Just give me a couple minutes. I gotta go find my, they keep taking my whiteboard
I will.
down. Hey, good. We got some, new ones.
You turn your volume up.
Which one's better?
Yeah, so it's good. When I'm talking, if you can mute your mics and that so that there's no background noise. Sometimes, it gets pretty crazy here too, in that we have some events happening. This is the Lethbridge Friendship Center we're out of. And this is how many classes, Gabriel, have we had? This would be our 10th class. I lost count of that. We've done quite a bit of vocabulary.
Okay, sorry, I muted me and then I unmuted me.
Huh?
Oh, I'm
Okay, I'll be right back. Hey home. Welcome. Ah, ah, ah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there we go. Ah. think they use permanent ink on this. You know what? I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use something else. All right. Well, we got Jocelyn and then we have Gabriel. We're just gonna wait a few more minutes. How's everybody doing? Valentine's is a day after tomorrow. Oh my goodness, eh? How time flies. In progress. Jocelyn, introduce yourself. You there?
I'm here. I was
All right.
muted.
Introduce yourself to our some of our students here. We don't have quite a few yet. They're probably just supper.
I don't forget about you.
Okay, my name is Jocelyn and I grew up close to Siksika Nation. Went to school in Arrowwood, and so I have a long history with being around Blackfoot, and my daughter introduced me to your course, and her name is Gabrielle, and my granddaughter's name is Saoirse. So you have so far, you have a family.
Small world. Woo!
Yeah.
Well,
so
welcome, 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 welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had over that weekend, I went to the big city of Edmonton. And there, I just learned that there's a whole lot of foster parents that live in and around Edmonton. Particularly, well, maybe right down Edmonton. And a social worker one time called me, learned about this program, right? And he listened in on it, and then he got some feedback. And he said, would you be willing to go up on a weekend to Edmonton and talk to our foster parents, about the language? So yeah, sure. So this past weekend, Friday, we took off, got up there, checked into our room, and yeah, then we made a presentation Saturday at a local school there on the north side of the city, kind of close to the St. Albert's. And then yeah, we made a presentation for an hour and a half. Me, I just love to talk. I went on and on and on and on, and I kind of lost my children, like the audience at about the first 15 minutes. Whoop, I lost it. But then I just targeted all the parents in that. I did so well that I'm going to do a presentation on the language this coming Wednesday. And over here in Lethbridge, it's called the Multicultural Center. Again, to foster parents and social workers and people that are working with children in the Black Confederacy. If you really want to know, the background or the children that you work with in that, the culture of the people is not necessarily what you see at powwows. the culture of the people in that, or within the language, how we view the world from a First Nation perspective in that, some of the changes that have occurred. Think of the culture that was, before contact. You know, think of the people that operated as a community. Um, how did they, as a community, select their leadership? How did they manage to, over the thousands and thousands of years, survive the harshness of what we call Canadian winters, right? Without the luxuries that we have today, that the tools that were, that they had, what kind of leadership did they have in that? What was the child care then in that? What was the family relationships in that? And we talked about how we look at family, right? How we um, say certain things. Remember, our word for auntie is the same word for mother, right? And we only have one word for our grandparents, and that's nachs, so all those things in that, right? And if we go further back into when we started talking about the Blackfoot Confederacy, even the word nina. Nina is a word for, of course, a man, but on the same token of that, the word nina also describes the person of leadership in that, right? As an example, who's the mayor here? I think it's Spearman. And it was Chris Spearman would be the mayor here, right? And we would say, well, he's the nina of the Lethbridge in that. And further to that, we have a female leader that's the premier of Alberta. Well, if it's a nina, we would say ninawaki, a leader who is a woman. We just put the word nina and aki together to create a compound word to describe the leadership role that the premier has, right? And even go further to that, we have a much more national leader, which is the prime minister. Well, he's Tokanena. He is the overall nina. What do we call Canada, right? Is Tokanena. So is he above the premiers? I don't know about how that works in that, but he would be the prime minister of Canada. And then further to oh no. But yeah, so that's how language works in that. If you can look at how we view the world that was and is now, you start to understand, the society that we are, right? We are a society of people that have leaderships, we have a language, and we view the world much differently than, the Western, because what comes out of our mouths and that, the language and that allows us to have values that were sustainable with those communities that was, right? Within our language and that, think about what's happening, in our society and that. We don't have a word for enemy. There is no such word of, this person is my enemy, these are my enemies, and we don't have the word enemy, right? And within our language and that, how does our leadership have all those years continually? Hello, Ian.
Hello.
How did they continue having leadership that are hereditary, right? Such and such a son is going to be the next chief and that. Well, collectively in that, everybody has to agree, right? So there's nothing in our language that says overthrow, impeach, or revolution, It was always ekachkeminno, right? That respect, right? Those are some of the core values that we have in that as a people. And we talked about family relationships and that, and we talked about how children, as they're very much part of, if not a really big part of our society to continue, those roles as caregivers and such. So we talked about relationships between man and woman, right? There's no patriarch societies to think that the man is up here. It was almost like the woman would be up here more than the man in that, right? It's equal. And we talked about the many wives, right? We practiced the whole ideologies of many wives, and that it wasn't something that was in doctrine as part of our religious ceremonies, and it was something so that the camp itself and the children wouldn't be left behind, and the woman wouldn't have to suffer without having anything to eat or a place to stay in that. And we talked about how that is, right? And we talked about, some of the relationships that we have with our in-laws, particularly our mother-in-law, those type of things and that. Some of those things are no longer practiced today. We're very much westernized. So tonight we're going to talk about a society now. We, as a society, we no longer need the skills. We no longer need those knowledge of how to hunt a buffalo. We no longer have to have those knowledges. Geeks in particular, if you're given a buffalo, the amount of work that goes into actually gutting it out, skinning it, using the hides for our clothing and such, all those skills. They switched over to much more, the Westerns, the new ideologies that came with it and that, right? With the new ideologies comes new inventions, and with those pedagogies that are happening within that Senate. While we grow up now in the school systems, that's something that's quite new, right? We didn't have a great school system as they would brought to us and that, they put us in residential schools. Like myself, I spent 2 years in a residential school. So those systems, we have to now live within those systems, an educational system. There is a system of law, right? The system of government and so forth, and all these other subcultures that influence us in that. Music, right? Dance and so forth, powwow. Those are all subcultures in that. But with all that happening in that, we still have our language. We still have the language of those nations, particularly the Blackfoots and so forth. With the language in that, we view the world much differently, and we interpret it as much different within ourselves in that, as Siksika, as Gaina, right? When I say that, okay, just an example. Not Bequan, okay? Automatically you think, oh, a not Bequan is a white man. But there's an underlying meaning of that. And Ia, do you remember that? Zach? Gabriel, do you remember what that is? Not Bequan? It's not necessarily
Hungry ghost.
What's that?
I've heard it's like hungry ghost or like Napi's people or something like that.
Yeah, it's like Napi was a person we used as a person to put balance back into our camps and that. So Napi behaved outside the norms of what we would call our societies and that, right? Everybody shared. Everybody had a focal point of sharing. Everybody was together, and we worked for the betterment of the community as a whole, not individualism, right? And Napi is kind of like, he would treat women bad, and that he would share his food and that. He goes on misadventures and things that are not normal for the fabric of the communities and that. So the Napi, in a sense, that's what we called them. They were very unstructured when they first came into this area, right? A lot of individualism. When I say that, well, think of what happened to the buffalo in that. We had never slaughtered a buffalo in that sense, right? To do those things and that, of course, and how they behaved with each other, with the women, right? So all those things, how they engaged themselves in that. As a people, we looked upon them as somebody they're very abnormal to the social fabric of our communities. That makes sense? That's to not be equal. And then, of course, there's other cultures out there, then Sixapiquans started coming, and the other people that came into this area, we have to call them as such, right? According to the culture that they came in. And that when we start to do people in that, we're going to start to look at their something characteristic of them, the communities and so forth. We have names of each of these towns that's something characteristic of it. For example, Cardston is Agochkim. which means the many wives, right? The Mormons, bring them young, and the person who came into this area, Cards, I'm not too sure what his first name is, but he was the Card, his last name. And he may have had many wives. Story has it that one of our leadership went over there to visit them and said, hey, okay, they were probably trying to talk sign language or try to interpret why they were there. And through observation, wait, hold on. Huh. I had to let some people in. Yeah, so the world started changing the moment the new systems of government started coming. They established themselves as communities, and we'll talk about those things and that. But today, the buffalo are no longer part of our needs, right? If you want to survive in this harsh Canadian winters, I heard a story that the Siksika, they had a presentation. I was listening to the guy. He's not a speaker. And you can tell he doesn't speak very. I don't think he's even a speaker of the language in that, but he's well versed in the storytellings of Blackfoot lore, Blackfoot legends, and that. And his part of his story is that Blackfoots only have 2 seasons, Stuye and Niboy. There's 6 months of cold and there's 6 months of real hot weather in that. So it's just broken down in just two basic seasons in that, right? So within that time period, there's going to be 6 months where you're going to be very preparing. You're going to be hunting for your food, the buffalo. Within those 6 months in that, you're going to be preparing your lodges. Within that 6 month period in that, you're going to be very, very busy providing yourselves in that, right? You're going to be going through another harsh winter. And then, so the buffalo was pretty well our main means of survival, right? With the buffalo, it supplied us with our shelter, our food, and of course, our clothing. And lots of work goes into that. So with that new system that came into that, we have to now work, right? We have to sort of get educated in that. So they developed an education system, which was already something that was already happening in Europe, in England and France, right? They already had school systems over there. They had universities and that higher learning. But here, amongst the Blackfoot, particularly, all the First Nations people in North America, education was something that was so new, right? So we had to first adopt and let go of what was hunting, right? And then of course traveling, looking for the buffalo and so forth. So they put us in communities. Now we're living in reserves and that, and this is where you're going to stay permanently. This is your permanent home and that. So they started introducing new ideas, school. But what happened in that is that, this was the Wild West, right? This was the Wild West in that. So who came in first in that? Of course, the hunters, the merchants and so forth and that. Is what they discovered, hey, these buffaloes make excellent hats and so forth and that. And down east and that, it was the beaver pelts and so forth. They loved the hats. They loved the buffalo hats and then the jackets and so forth. So so that's where the capitalism started happening in that. So they started taking the raw materials from our land and that happened to be the buffalo that sustained us in that. So those raw materials were sent back forth and that made into hats and whatnot, right? So now it was a wild west in that. So that's just where our first jobs, the first people who had jobs that were given pay for their services and that. And we call them mohkasukasimi, who are the what they call the redcoats. So the first people that came into this area, it was these individuals, these people, okay? These are the first people that were paid to do a job to put law and order, particularly, you know, the whiskey trade and that, to put a stop to it and that. So this person here was obviously given a pension or pay or for their services and that, and they came west. They call them the Northwest Mounted Police. So they came and then they established law and order, right? So they First Nations people and that, when they met these individuals, Colonel McLeod and so forth and that, you know, they made some kind of contact with, you know, with the chiefs and the leaderships and that, and they were told, well, you know, we are what they call the police, the Northwest Mounted Police and that. So when we made an observation, what is it that you do then? You know, what is your job? And this is their job right here. It really describes what they do. Iyan nakikoan. Iyan nakikoan. The first part of that word, of course, is part of the word that's called iyinni. What does that mean? Iyinni means that he grabs you, right? It's grabbing. So that person and I probably puts his arm around the person, or he puts his hand on his wrist, but it's the whole action of grabbing, right? So it's grab, or you can say apprehend. But for the most part, when you grab, we're apprehending, right? It's an apprehension in that, but the action that they're doing is that they're grabbing. Iyin, okay? Iyin. That's part of the word in that. It's only when you start to put, you know, the suffix of iyinna. Iyinna, meaning that that person was grabbed. Iyinna, right? I'm not too sure if they had handcuffs back in the day. Did they? Anybody do any research? Did the RCMP back in the 1800s have handcuffs? Or did they just shoot? But anyways, so what they do is they grab you, right? So, you know, so the indigenous people with the Blackfoots and that, they start making those observations and oh, they grab you, right? And then they take you away. So the word was born, and we call these individuals Iyin na ki guan. Iyin na ki guan. And all the Northwest Mounted Police that came into this area and that, they were much different than, you know, the police that they had in the United States. Of course, they had the US Cavalry, which was an army, right? They were just such as different from that philosophy of having an army, you know, and clearing out the land and so forth. These were people that came in to establish law and order. So the first people that came into this area that were paid for their services were the Iyenakikuan. Okay? All male. Everybody was male in that. And of course, they came into this area. They probably, some of these individuals in that have never ever seen a Blackfoot or never see, because they came from down east, right? So along the way, they must have ran into the Ojibways, they must have ran into the Plains Cree and so forth. That and some of the memoirs, if you read some of Lewis and Clark's memoirs and that, the men back in the 1700s and that, on average, a male man, like a male man that's probably at the height of his maleness, a young man at 20, they were 6'6", 6'8" on average. So, these policemen these Inagigans were coming into this area, never seeing a Blackfoot Maine, and all of a sudden you're dealing with, they must have been looking skyward, right? These guys were 6'6" on average, the men. They were huge men in that, right? So, they were not necessarily grabbing the men, the Indian men, it was the whiskey traders, right? They were grabbing the whiskey traders and so forth. So these were one of the first things that came. So they established themselves in a Fort McLeod, okay? Fort McLeod in Blackfoot, we call it Agabuius. I'm going to put this down, and that this is one of your first communities. We're going to be doing a whole thing on communities now, but this is one of the first communities. Agabuius. So they started building a fort. And it was a fort that had policemen, right? So they can have a police outpost. And they started arresting all the whiskey traders, the American whiskey traders, and so forth. Put law back into this area, and they chased them out. With that happening, and that, it kind of tamed this area. It's no longer a lawless area, southern Alberta. And they moved on, and they established what they call Fort McLeod. Why we call that Agabuius? It translates to many houses. Agabuius is many houses.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the first communities that had houses, right? So the fort itself, and they started building probably community houses and so forth. Started building merchants. If you're going to start building a town there, it's probably one of the oldest towns here in southern Alberta, is Fort McLeod, right? And then we call it Agabuius, Fort McLeod. Not after the police and that, just because of that, the people started making observations and hey, they're starting to build houses over there and that. So therefore we call it Agabuius. Many houses. Yeah, Agabuius. Not the fort, but the houses that surrounded it. So that was where the first people that came into southern Alberta as people who got paid for their services. And this is how you spell it. It's behind me, but and if you want to put as a translation, and you can put policeman, but the actual translation is grab man, grabs man, a person who grabs you, gives you a bear hug, twists your arm, literally grab person, right? And so this profession was kind of exclusive to to male, until I'm not too sure what year in that, but the whole ideology, I suppose, in that of the people who established law and order, they figured, hey, we'll just get all the male to be our Inagigwans, the police, right? So Inagigwan was exclusively just for males until, and this is a lot common now. Okay? Okay, the word iyin is still in there, iyinna, right? Grab, with the suffix of that word is aki. Iyinnakyaki. You notice he's reaching for her gun? That's the first thing he's just reaching for. It's like, all right, I want ID right now. You look suspicious. But in Nakyaki now, of course, it's part of the the forces that we have now. But again, the prefix of the word is right here, iyin. Make note of that, because that's very important in that, because as their role started expanding, not only were they outlawing, the Americans and the whiskey trade and so forth. So, Canada became what it is, a dominion of Canada. Started off, of course, with the upper and lower and upper Canada and so forth and that. And then it became a country in 1867. It became a union, right? And they only had Quebec, Ontario, and so forth and that. But it was a country now expanding in that, right? So, the Americans, of course, in 1877, they had the revolution. So they were 100 years ahead of Canada. So, and as a land grab, they started coming west and so forth and that. They divvied up the land and they started making laws, right? Within these laws was school, right? We all had to attend school. You and I, and every child has a right to education and that. So they started building towns. Within the towns and that, they started having schools. And then on the reserves, of course, it's no secret, they started building residential schools, big, humongous 3-story buildings and that. And these are the schools that we are now going to attend, right? So what happened now? The role of the Inukikwan expanded. So one of the laws was that all children must attend schools, right? From when they're about 5 years old, and there was no parental support. They couldn't visit the schools and that. So once the child was taken away from your home, you were brought to the school, you would never see your child probably that whole year until school's up. In some cases, that some of these kids didn't come back, right? In the Kikwan, that they really expanded their role in that. And they actually had patrol of people of Dorinakikwans on horseback, and they'd visit encampments, and they would literally grab the children. That's, another form of grabbing. So they start grabbing these children and that, and then they put them in wagons and so forth and truck them away, right? And if you, as a parent, opposed, or, if you didn't abide by their rules and that, you would be thrown in jail, right? You would be that's in and they'd be thrown in jail in that. So that word, the Inukik, even expanded to, the children and the parents and that, so forth and that. Further to that, now, nobody really knows this, but right here in southern Alberta, they had a pass system. A pass system is that an Indian agent would be sort of in charge of the day-to-day operations of the reserve and that, right? Yeah, of course, we had a chief and council and so forth and that. But for the most part, if you wanted to sell hay, if you wanted to sell coal, if you wanted to sell something outside the res, you would first have to go see the Indian agent and you would sign off on it. Or if you want to go to town in the city of Lethbridge, you would have to first go see the Indian agent, sign off on it, then you would come into town, then you'd be walking around with a permit about the size of this paper and that, right? Signed by the Indian agent. On there would be your name, right? The time that you're left, the date, and what time you're supposed to be back. Now, if you were caught in the city of Lethbridge outside your curfew, right? Let's say you were supposed to be back on the reserve at 6 o'clock, and you're still kind of walking around downtown at 7 o'clock. The Inukikwan has every right to throw you in jail just because you missed your curfew. They would literally throw you in jail, right? So these Inakikwans knew their role quite well, to make sure that law and order, that no Indians are walking around town after 6 o'clock. Throw them in jail, right? Or if you're like the Sinakyaki, yeah, they go for the gun. Nama. So that's the Inukikwan, right? The Inukikwan. And that's the first jobs that they had. Right here, they got paid for their services. All right, so we're gonna go a little bit. So the next people probably were here before the Indic ones, and I'm thinking about Achsalpi and Father Lacombe. You know, those are some of the individuals that lived right in the communities that they had churches at. Father Laverne lived in the community called Suitapi. So, you know, that area of Glenwood and that. He lived there with Sutana, Rainy Chief. And Sutana gave him that name. Achsapi means that he's very happy with his home. Achsapi, right? So then they started looking at, you know, what is it that they do? You know, what is their role in that? Obviously, you know, they have a role within their societies and that. We have to adopt this new role that. So they started establishing churches and that. There's you know, they pray just as we do in that, but they pray in those churches, right? You know, these churches, and then they only go over there on Sundays. Remember our days of the week? Just on Sundays, they seem to go to these churches and that. And then, of course, the person in there is called the priest, and he conducts all the ceremonies, he conducts all the prayers and so forth and that, sort of like a teacher, right? So they started noticing that they dressed in black and some of them dressed in white. So they call him Na Tuyapikoan, a holy white man. Na Tuyapikoan. So these were probably the first two people that we observed that, you know, had a profession, that they only did one thing and one thing only. And this person here was the Natuyapikon, the priest, right? And of course, further to that, we call these people, and that, of course, this is probably a Catholic. I'll put it down here. And we call them the black robe people or the black cloth people, okay? Of course, the black cloth, that's the black cloth, right? Black cloth. Sugasin. Sugasin is just like a garment, right? Garment that you and I wear. Then you put those two words together in that, and you create sugasimi. It's a big long word. The person who wears the black cloth. Right? And that's what we call the Catholics. So these people were, of course, the holy white man. That's what that means. Did you see the word Napikon is part of the suffix word? Natuyi is holy. Natuyi, Natuya Pikon, right? So these people in that, of course, they started establishing churches, particularly the Anglican and the Catholics in that, right? And each of them, of course, they had priests in that. Catholics call their priests father, right? Anglicans, they call their priests reverend, right? And so forth and that. And there's other churches that came afterwards and that, but these were the main two that established schools. Residential schools, St. Paul's, St. Mary's on a blood reserve.
Old Sun.
Old Sun in Siksika and Chief Crowfoot in Siksika. Bigani had St. Cyprian and St. Aloysius.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so all those schools started. You know, some of them were made out of wood and burnt down and that. For the most part, afterward, about 1917 and so forth and that, they were made out of brick, 3 stories high, 4 stories, some of them in that. Humongous. Those of you have, if you can drive down to southern Alberta, way down to Carson, go west on that road that says St. Paul's, the actual St. Paul's school is still there. And I think in 2006, oh no, it was later than that. I think 2010, the old St. Mary's school burnt down, right? Is that 2010 or is that later? 2015? Yeah, it burnt. And you know, it was arson. They figured somebody was over there and they deliberately burnt it down. That was about the time when you know, all that residential school stuff was happening, and that the Truth and Reconciliation, and they started interviewing all these people across Canada. And later on, they came up with that calls to action type of, you know, that paper. It was around about that time and that. So probably somebody got triggered and probably went over there, let's burn it down. So not only did the Natuya people come in and that, but they also have females too within themselves. They came to help out with the churches and that. And these are Natuwa Baki, the holy woman. Natuwa Baki. It doesn't say whether they're Napiaki or anything, just a Natuwa Baki. Holy is the first part of the word, right? Natuwa Baki. And Aki is up here. You only put the P there so to make it flow, right? Natuwa Baki. So these are the nuns, right? These were the nuns. These were the nuns that kind of helped out with the day-to-day activities at the residential schools and that. They're the ones that supervised. I always hear of this, but there was a lady that terrorized the boys at the St. Mary's School. Her name was Sister Jabber. I didn't know her personally, but every time I talked to people my age or within my age and that, they said Sister Jabber was cruel, made it a living hell every day for those boys over there and the girls. It was quite the ordeal for them in that, right? And it's, I just can't imagine, you know, that if you know, some of the stuff that was shared with me when I went to school at St. Paul's. You know, I didn't see it. Well, I heard it, a lot of crying and stuff and that, right? But you know, they must have did, you know, the other stuff behind closed doors and stuff and that. But anyways, not the Wapaki. Did you notice this picture? It's not really a woman, it's a guy in a Halloween outfit. He's a Nina. I couldn't find the picture out there with a real nun. They don't dress like that anymore. Not the wild. They're just regular people, and they just wear regular clothes. But this guy here he's a guy dressed as a nun, not the wild. But so those are the two professions that came into our area, right? So we started recognizing that, okay, now we have a new system. We're going to go to school. There's going to be teachers there. You know, there's grades. You know, we're going to start off at kindergarten, K5. And as you get older than that, you're going to grade 1, 2, 3, all the way to grade 12 on that, right? But when you started going to school and stuff on that, of course, one of the biggest things that happened amongst all First Nations and that was an epidemic of the worst proportions they could ever have. It's probably in the same line as the bubonic plague that happened in Europe with the Spanish flu after the First World War. Well, this is called Bixen systems. Bixen systems is what you call smallpox. Smallpox, right? It just killed millions. I heard, now this is through stories and that, but one of the bigger tribes amongst the Blackfoot Confederacy were the ones that were on the foothills, the Piikani. Well, you know, they were quite almost 10,000 teepees, and each teepee would have anywhere up to maybe 600 people in the teepee. So we got 10,000 teepees in that. Smallpox hit them, and there's only 200 left after that. 200. 200 left of the Piikani after the second. There was the first epidemic, and there was a second wave, right? So it just dwindled everybody to its, it was just, it was such a epidemic of, huge proportions. Lots and lots of people passed in that. Everybody knows where Standoff is, eh? The community of Townsite. Well, up on top of that hill and that, when they started building those houses and that, did you know that they were unearthing, not graves and that, but human remains? So what they were saying is that that may have been a smallpox camp that was left. So, the camp itself and that must have had smallpox. So, those people that had smallpox and that, they just remained. They did, they knew that it was a very mysterious illness and that they just remained and they just probably dwelled right there in that area. So if you hear some of the earlier stories of that place, when they first started moving to those houses back in the early 70s, people were getting haunted in that community, those houses and that. So, there must have been a lot of blessings that were happening in that area and that. But, that's what was happening in that all throughout southern Alberta into Saskatchewan, that smallpox. People were just left, right? They didn't move and that. So they just kind of just died right there. So as a result of the illnesses and that, so forth, and that, our medicines weren't working and our sweats weren't working and that, smallpox just took its toll in that. So we needed medicine. So as part of our treaties, they came up with these people. This guy is a Esokinaki. Esokinaki, which really translates a person who heals. Esokinaki. A person who heals. And this word is an old Blackfoot word in that, because within our camps and that there were individuals that were very gifted and talented in herbal teas. They recognized all the plants and recognized all the roots and so forth, and that you combine them, then you make a tea. Just to give them stun. You got all, if you have an ailment of your stomach, if you're having diarrhea, or if you're having any kind of, if you have headaches and so forth and that, you go see the Esokinaki, he'll make you some good tea, right? There's no witch doctor, it's just good old herbal tea, and then he'll know exactly which plants to harvest, which plants to dig up, what roots and so forth, and he'll be an Esokinaki. So when this person came into our area, because now we're suffering from not only smallpox, but there was an epidemic afterwards in the 60s called TB. Tuberculosis. Yeah. So that was another epidemic that happened, and it was called TB, right? And of course, the Esokinaki to think, okay, we need to vaccinate these people and that, and we need to give them boosters. And I don't think any of you guys have this and that, but I think I'm the last person. Can you see that? Let me just see.
It's like that big bite, eh? Looks like.
Yeah, it's that great big thing right there on my arm.
Yeah, I see.
You know what that is? That was a booster shot because they wanted to eliminate
inoculation.
Smallpox. Anybody else have that?
Yeah, my grandma has that.
What's this thing right here?
Yeah,
huge.
Yeah, the big one.
See it right there.
I
We
have
all
one.
got shots like that, right? I think we got it just as we were infants. Okay, we need to give these children immunization. That they don't seem to have the what's that?
Immunities.
The immunity to fight off just a common cold. Common colds and that were wiping out some indigenous people and that. So we needed to build up our immune system and that's why they gave us these shots. Yeah. And of course, TB started coming in, and all of a sudden we had measles. Measles started coming in, chicken pox, and then of course, now we're fighting. Everybody's fighting. It's the global, is the COVID, right? So now the Esokinaki developed the vaccination because COVID is still around. Yeah, Esokinaki. So that's another one. That was another profession that came into our, to our area, and that exclusively he gets paid to do his work, and that he gets paid to do open up his office and he gets paid. And that was part of our treaties and that. It's called the medicine chest. And it's always under debate. What exactly is the medicine chest? Does that include the esukinaki and the pharmaceuticals that come with the esukinaki? It's always over debate in that. So, but I think you just got to keep the esukinaki. We have doctors now are from our nation, right? Esther Telfeathers,
Mhm.
what's his name? That Eagle Bear, he's a doctor now too. Lots of doctors. And of course, not only is this exclusive to Nene, women. Esukinakyaki. Esukinakyaki. Can you see that? Esukinakyaki is called a nurse, but it's also a doctor now too, right? Esukinakyaki. So when somebody is just a doctor, a woman or a man, you say esukinaki, okay? Somebody who heals. That's all doctors, whether it be female or male. So make note of that. And all nurses are esukinakyaki. I tell you. So then I was in a COVID unit about 2 years ago, and all my nurses were male. So how do you say a nurse in male? Esukinakina, So there's a lot of male nurses now, but these are exclusively the nurses. Esukinakyaki. Yeah, so that's another profession, very important, very, very important that these people are here with us and that. We need to have law and order. Get those whiskey traders, arrest them, grab them. Where the kids need to go to school, and now, okay, let's arrest the parents and grab the children, right? And that's what we call them, according to the actions that they do, right? And what does he do? Well, he's a holy person that conducts the church and that. And if you look at the person in front, and there's a lot of stuff that he does, right? Host, right? He provides host, the bread and so forth. So okay, Natuya is a holy man. Natuya. So it's an observation of that, right? We call him as such, and it's it's very visual, and it's very we don't have to define the word. The definition is right in there already. Natuya. Okay. Moving right along. So we have 3 professions that were devoted to law and order. And we have one that we all need to go to church and that 7 days out of the week, 4 days out of those 7 days a week are devoted to the churches and that. So, there was very influential into the community, the churches, right? Saturday, and of course Friday, all church, right? So now they established schools and that, they got these big residential schools and that. So, so they tell the communities now, okay, now your children have to go to school. We have schools now. We call them St. Paul's School, and there's a school called St. Mary's School, and your children have to attend. They don't only attend the schools, but they have to sleep there. You have to reside there in that. It's within the laws of Canada that the children are not to be home. They have to go to school now. We all have to go to school, right? Like even today's standards and that, but they went a step further and they told that, the community members of Ghana, the children can now no longer live with you and that they all have to go to school and live at the school. Okay. So, and of course, they, the leadership in that. Now think of the value system that we lived at, right? And is that we really respect leadership and that we really respect the fact that, okay, this is for the community, right? Give them a beep, and all those things and that. Okay, we're going to follow exactly what they're saying in that, right? Even though there's going to be a separation, I'm sure there was, a little bit of separation, and guys were getting angry and that, but that's where Inakikwits came in and would grab you and so forth and that. So they were started going to school. Now, these people came, and now they're teaching you how to speak a different language that's not your own. You see that thing right there? See that instrument that he has right there? What do you think that's for? I don't think that's for like pointing, and that's for if you don't say your ABCs right, they're gonna just hit you over the head with that. Right?
Yep, it's true.
Yeah, it was very harsh, very harsh. Esxinimatski. 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 Yeah. There's a bit of a glottal stop right there. Esxinima. The first part of the prefix word is esxinima. It means he or she teaches. And then toki, this part right here, the suffix sound is that's what he does. Esxinima, it's toki. Okay? A teacher. Esxinima, it's toki. Yeah, so that's the word we use for anybody that's a female or a male teacher. Esxinima, it's toki. Yeah, so that's the professions that were very, very much prevalent. We needed them. These were the new systems that needed to be in place. We need to have law and order. Okay, let's have policemen. Okay, so those were the first ones. We need religion. Okay, we need to teach, the populace religion and that. We're going to start establishing churches. Not to yapi, not to wapaki. Then of course we started getting sick. Yeah, just a common cold and that. There was no such thing as heart disease or diabetes and that. It was, those viruses that were killing us off and that, right? So they started trying to give us, the shots and that. There's great big ones and that to fight off the smallpox, immunizations and so forth and that. So okay, we got it established. Now we've got to build schools. Let's start building a school. They started building schools, and a new profession came in. I visited the old St. Paul's school. The old St. Paul's school is just on the north side of Old Agency, just at the very end of the buttes and that. They call it the Big Island. I went over there, and it's two separate buildings. It's just a two-story building. It's all made out of wood. Before they fell. And I was looking at them, and my grandfather's brother, Pete Weasel Moccasin, he said, I went to school here as a little boy. By the time he was in, the school and that, he was already like about 12, 13. And so he went to school there. And he said that, they would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the winters, and they would dress at their sleeping quarters. They would stogie up the stove to warm up their sleeping quarters and that. And then the two of them would go to the school where they went to school, and it was a separate building and that. And they would bring the wood and they'd start the fire and warm it up over there. And they'd go back and they'd do their chores and that, right? They have to eat and so forth. And after that, when they're ready, then they go to school. They'd spend a whole day at the school and that. And their teacher's name was Mr. Campbell. And his wife was Mrs. Campbell. That's all they knew him as, Mr. and Mr. Campbell. They were a man and wife teachers. Just the two of them, right? And they lived right there with the students. And when they passed, they didn't bring them back to where they came from, like which community and that. Did you know that just straight west of where the school is along the tree line, there's a cemetery. In that cemetery is Mr. Campbell and Mrs. Campbell, the first teachers of that school. Yeah. And there's an Indian agent. I'm not too sure what his name is, but everybody called him, like they must have, There was an Indian agent there. It was just, I don't know what his name is, but he had a house in that same area. And everybody just called him Omuksisi, crooked nose, right? That was his name, Omuksisi. And then when he passed, and that they didn't bring his body back to where he came from, they just buried him in the same area. So in that cemetery, there's about 4 graves of maybe 3 teachers, maybe one Indian agent, all right there. You know, so they remained there until they retired, literally, like when they literally retired, and that they're right there. Yeah, so those are the 4 main professions, right? Very much part of who we are as the new society, right? So within these schools and that, of course, we start to learn a new alphabet foreign to us and that, and new systems of writing. We're not a writing society, or we never wrote our things in that. Ours was more of our word, right? We live by the social norms of our word, right? If I'm a liar and that, I don't think I'd be very trusted within my community. So in order to be part of this social fabric that we call an encampment, and that I have to be true to myself every day. I have to be true to myself and my family on a daily basis, and that, right? If things in your community start to behave like Napi and that, the leadership in that will probably come together as let's address this. This is not happening, and so forth and that. So there's always probably a lot of dialogue, every day, like everyday dialogue as to okay, how was the day, and so forth and that, right? And that's how the language is, right? We keep developing our language through the dialogues and so forth and that. So, any questions for professions? Of course, now we have lots. We all go to school, and then we start to go to school to be tradesmen, right? You want to build a house? Well, you got to be a carpenter. You go to school to be a carpenter. And then you want to be a doctor, well, right? It's already there in that. You want to be a policeman? Okay, in the you go to school for those things. So we recognize now that our new Buffalo is the
Education.
schools. Yeah, the school systems are the new Buffalo. It's a cliche, but it's very much true, right? It is very true that in order for us to have the 3 things that we need money. In order to gain money in that, you have to have skills, right? In order to have skills, we need to go to school. Yeah, so myself, I went to school to be a teacher, and I'm still doing it. So, any questions?
You said you said the word for smallpox. What was it, like? Peak. Could you repeat it?
Bixen is that your scab. Bixen.
Okay.
Do you remember the word for bikani? Bixen.
Bixen,
Yeah,
scabby rope.
Bixen. Yeah, that's what smallpox. Bixen. And I seen a picture of a smallpox person. His face was just literally like it was just red, all these dots, and Bixen, right? It's the fever that kills you, not necessarily the smallpox and that, but the smallpox in itself are all these little dots, just covers your whole body.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the fever is what kills the person, and that it's just such a high fever. But so what they see is that the dots, right? All these spots all throughout their body, and that. System sin is your body is not well. SC, right? SC.
SC.
So big sinister. Let's put that down. Smallpox. I tell you.
Well, because it changed so much. Like more than 95% of the populations were wiped out. Like it's fucking devastation.
Smallpox, yeah. Not only us in that, but in South America, and that they just totally wiped out. The South American Indians. The Incas and so forth. That. They were just dying by the thousands, if not by the millions, right?
Yeah.
Smallpox. And that's all it is. It's just a virus, just so think of the people that were here. They probably got sick, but not viral sick, right? they must have ate something and it had like a little bit, oh my goodness, my meat wasn't cooked very right, or must have ate the wrong berry. So, you know, those was kind of ailments. Did we get heartburn? Well, probably, yeah. You know, and of course, that's where esukinaki, they start making teas. And they're not viral in a sense, they're just a little bit of bacterial type of thing in that. But, you know, a little bit of tea, and it kind of combat, and, you know, then you're good to go. But then the viruses, you know, those are the, you know, the ones that you don't see are the most dangerous ones amongst the First Nations.
Yeah.
Smallpox. Okay, you guys want to know smallpox? Okay. Deadly. How do you spell pox? P-A-X.
X. Yeah.
Vixen is system. Is system. Sin. Yeah. Vixen is system sin. So it's two words. Vixen is the scabs, you know, not necessarily scabs, but you know, the looks like scabs, right?
The sores, yeah.
Yeah, the sores that come with it. Vixen is system sin is when your body's not well. It's system. He's sick. That's system. I'm sick. So here is some literature. Okay, listen up. Going back to family, Nistamu Esukinaki. Anybody? Nistamu Esukinaki. Okay, let's make it easy. Nin Esukinaki. Come on, guys. I'm always over there with my. No, just kidding. Nin Esukinaki.
Your father's a doctor.
Yeah, whose father? Mine or your? Nin.
Nin. So that would be my father.
Yeah, is a
doctor.
Good, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Here's one. Nixist Esukinakyaki. Nixist Esukinakyaki.
Your mother is a doctor?
Yeah, whose? My mother.
Yours.
Yeah,
These two.
yeah, my Nixist Esukinaki is a doctor, right? Esukinaki. Great, now here's one. Going back to Nistamu. Iyinnaki Kwan. Nistamu Iyinnaki Kwan.
Our father is a
Nope.
RCMP. No.
Nistamu.
Brother-in-law?
Our
Which
grandpa.
brother-in-law is that? Nistamu. Your sister, husband, or your wife's brother?
Wife's brother.
Yeah, your wife's brother. Nistamu. So what did I say? Inaki. So my brother-in-law is a policeman.
Police officer.
Police officer.
Yeah.
Yeah, officer. Okay, here's one. Geeksist. Not the wapaki. Geeksist. Not the wapaki.
Your mother is a holy woman.
Yeah, good. Your mother. Gee, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, gee is your. Okay, that's second person. Okay. On. Na tuya pikon. On. Na tuya pikon.
There.
He is a priest.
Gabriel. Yeah, you had it. Say it again.
He's a priest.
He,
He's a priest. Yeah.
His dad is a priest. His dad. It's a third person. Your dad, his dad. Un. Natuya pikon. Un. Okay. Ni first person. Gi, second person. Ooh,
Ooh.
third person. Nin, gin, on, third person. Got it? Ni exist, gi exist, oo exist, third person. Okay. Wait, let's think of another one. No. Okay, this is gonna be a funny one. Remember the word and
Yeah.
Okay. Bonagamita esokinaki.
That's the doctor's horse.
That doctor, I mean, that horse is a doctor.
Oh,
Bus, not the wapati.
that cat.
Bus.
That cat is a holy person.
Yeah, is it holy person woman? Yeah, see? See how the language works, eh? And So, it's very descriptive of, those people that came to us. One of the first people that came into Southern Alberta as far as a profession were the police, right? Yinnakikoans and that. And we describe them as such. They grab you. So in essence, Yinnakikon is a grab a man. Yinnakyaki, a grab person in that, right? They literally grab you, right? They grab you, and if you resist arrest of that, well, sayonara. But that's the description. As Sukinaki, it translates to a person who heals. A person who heals. As Sukinaki. Okay.
So you could
as
say like,
Sukinaki- yeah, Zach.
so you could say, because like with equine therapy, right? So you
Yeah.
could say po nakamita e siko
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like
e siko
esokinaki,
naki.
like in a sense, there's what they call what you said, those equine therapies and that.
Yeah.
We do,
Yeah.
we've seen that, and I've worked at a school where our population of what they call our special needs, they went
Yeah.
out and they went to Cardston. I think Cardston kind of cut out that program, that we had to go all the way to a place just outside Lethbridge, east of Lethbridge by the jail. They had a similar program, and we had three or four, and that was good therapy for them. All the
Yeah.
horses were, I actually went on one of them. I was curious. I wanted to see them, and I asked, "Can I, just for the sake of seeing it myself and that, because these children are very inclusive in our classrooms and that. So there are special needs. They have challenges, whether it be physical challenges or mental challenges and that. But they were part of the regular school.
Mhm.
So when they went, I said, "Oh, can I come along and see it?" And just you can just see like on their faces and that. It's just like, wow. And they're riding these horses, and they have control over them. So you pull on the reins on this side, makes the horse go this way. Pull the reins on that side, and those horses are so tame and that, right? They're just like, and you pull on the reins and it stops. The kids, they're just like, I'm in control of this, this huge animal, put a garment on that. Yeah, so you can say that, that to put a garment on, in a sense, it heals that person up here,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and of course, imita, right? So
Mhm.
use the imita as part of the esukinaki, because don't they use puppies when they bring them to the hospitals and stuff?
Oh yeah.
As another therapy, right? So
And then,
oh yeah, of course, yeah.
and they have
They
the
bring
guide
all
dogs
these
too, right?
animals to the people that have some ailments, that are chronically ill.
Yeah.
And they have pet therapy, right? So
Yeah.
they get to go pet a nice doggy with I hate cats. Puss.
Mhm.
I don't think
What
there's
about
anything
working
better.
dogs? Like the dogs that
Oh
like
yeah,
are
the
like
dog
guide
would be
dogs or
like a
service animal?
dog. A dog would be a yinnaki. Yinnaki umita.
Yin.
Yinnaki umita. The first part of your prefix, yinnaki umita, he's not necessarily grabbing you in that, but the profession that he's doing is yinnaki, right?
Yeah.
So yinnaki umita.
That'd be a police dog.
Freaking dog, yeah. The
But what about
dogs,
like a what about like a
the
dog for like
canine
somebody?
units. the sniffing dogs and that, right?
Nakomita, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's the dogs
These-
too that
these
people
animals,
use
they
for
really have,
mind.
they developed in a sense that they provide some therapy, the horses and the dogs themselves too. And that.
Yeah.
German shepherds especially. Eh? Ooh, they're the ones that Yinnaki with that is shepherds. Very, very sharp noses. I know they're very aggressive. They
Smart.
like. So that brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to one more. I'm gonna give you some more tests. Okay, here's one. Nachts. Nachts. Yinnaki.
My grandparents are police. Your grandparents are police.
Nachts. Yeah, mine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nachts. Yinnaki. Yeah. Is a policewoman.
Oh, police.
Aki, right? It gives you an idea. They when you start to do a little bit more professions and that, we're gonna start into the ones that are kind of like secretaries, right? I don't think they have those people anymore, but telephone repairmans and so forth. That there are some professions out there no longer part of the professions and that because everything's so automated and so forth and that. But we still have plumbers, we still have carpenters, we do have optometrists, and we do have dentists and so forth. So we're going to go expand just a little bit more, not too far on that. And I want to get into colors. When I say colors in that, we need to establish we don't just have colors, we have colors of animate and inanimate. Okay. And we have colors to describe the horses, right? There's different horses out there. And we'll discuss those different colors of horses in that, right? When we say a color with the suffix me, we're talking about an animal, the pelt, the color of its fur, right? Sikimi, right? Which is black, Sikimi. Sikabi, right? Which is a gray. So in all those colors in that, right? I have a moxanachi shirt, moxanatsi, right? Inanimate, a red shirt. Moxanum, an animal, a moxanum. I'm trying to think of an animal that's red. A big red dog, Clifford.
Clifford.
Yeah, moxanum, right? Moxanum. Clifford the big red dog. Another one that's kind of like, Franklin, I think it's a turtle, right? Sesksi magoinum. Sesksi magoinatsi is just green, a green shirt, right? A green hat. So that's how colors work. But now we'll do a few more professions next week. And then we'll get into more of our colors and that. But keep in mind how we're doing some of the stuff that we ties into what we're doing now. Nina inaki kon. Aki inakyaki. Pikani kon inaki kon. Pikanaki esukinaki. Kane kon natuyapi kon. Siksikay kon inaki kon. See how that works? You guys understand what I just said? Here's one. Anybody want to try that one?
That man from Kainai is a doctor.
Hey! Makes me want to dance when I hear that. You guys are just so good. And then when I get closer to the powwow, that's in about 2 weeks, we'll do just on powwow, okay? The significance of powwow, how it traveled into the Blackfoots and that, just the whole concept. Because it wasn't something that we were born out of, and it was something that came into our area. And we'll talk about that too. When we say powwow and that, we have a different word for that, and that's going to be part of our lesson in that. We'll talk about the little drum, and in behind this thing is a big drum. And we'll talk about the history of how that drum came here. Okay, and it's a very rich history that we have. with that drum. And it was a peace treaty between the Bloods or the Blackfoots and a neighboring tribe from the South Dakota, North Dakota. Very rich. Sitting Bull and Red Crow. Okay. And it's a very interesting story, but probably in about 2 weeks we'll talk about that. Okay. So Gapi, any questions? All right, here's another one. Pikanaki Natuapaki.
That woman from Picani is a holy woman.
Hey, yeah. Hey, woman, I just want to dance when I hear that.
Buscan.
So good. Yeah. Sakkumapi.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't be a Sakkumapi. He's too young. Siksakaki Asukinaki.
That woman from Siksika is a doctor.
Is a doctor. Good. Yeah. You guys got the ears for it now. See how that works, eh? Yeah, so it's really all that vocabulary that we're doing, their nouns and that, to start to make sense when you start to put them together, right? Okay, let's just put a long one. Nina ki ki esukinakiya. Plural.
That man and that woman are both doctors.
Are doctors. Yeah. Okay, see? See how that works? That little bit of ya at the end of that plurals, okay? Now here's one. Gina ki kipitaki iyinnaki kuan ki iyinnakyaki.
The old man and the old woman are a policeman and a policewoman.
Yay! Yeah. Good. Zach, you're awesome. So I'm gonna leave it at that. You got about 5 minutes. The weather's been really nice here, but I tell you, it's just like a +2 out there, and it's muddy as heck out in the res. And hey, thank you for having me. And we're going to continue with this thing, and hopefully until about the end of June. That's going to be so much Blackfoot tonight. I was hoping Sue was going to be here, and that I got so much material I want to email you guys, and you can have them on your computer. Just put them on your, what do they call that little thing you put in your computer? Download it. What do you call it?
Your smart draw, your little flash drive.
Flash drive, yeah. Put them in your flash drive, and you'll have all the Blackfoots that's here on your flash card. Yeah. Okay. Hey, yeah. So, I tell you, we are working right now. Myself, I just got hired now to start teaching Blackfoot to foster parents. And I think I shared this with somebody that was here. I went to Edmonton on Saturday, Friday. Went up Saturday. We had a session of about 15 parents from the Edmonton area who are foster parenting children from Ghana, Siksika, and Piikani. This is the first time they've had the language in that, right? They've had other cultural activities in that, but this was the first time they actually got the language. So when I started talking about, who we are as people and how we describe things and how we view the world much differently than the Western world and that, I lost the kids at about maybe the first 15 minutes of that, but we sang a song. But afterwards, I started talking to the foster parents and that, and they just like, some of them, their jaws dropped, and some of their eyes went, "What? I didn't know that," So here we are, 2024, and how long have we been here? And Napi only came here just recently with the last 200 years and that, not maybe 2-3 generations and that. And you're now just knowing who we are,
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that, we've come this far, and we're coming at a point right now that we need to have these things recorded. So that's why we're going to be, hopefully, have a huge undertaking here. We're going to try and get some monies, me and my wife. We have an application to get up towards $50,000 for audio equipment, video equipment, and screens and so forth, lighting, just the whole shebang and that. Just get a whole bunch of Blackfoot material. 15-minute segments, 20-minute segments, special guests come in, dialogue, storytelling. Just get as much material out there and just put it through the internet. Feed it through the internet, right? So the people in that who live in Edmonton and that who are foster parents of Blackfoot children, you know, they can put it on and stuff like that. And there it is. Hey, so that's how you say dog, and that's how you say, you know, to expand the language. That's a big cat. That's a big, humongous monkey. So, you know, it's those type of things. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, everybody. Are you interested in learning a simple prayer in Blackfoot?
Yes, please.
Huh?
Yes, please. I would like
Okay.
it very much.
All right. I have a very simple, it's just about an 8-line prayer that I do. It's very simple, and I'll teach you that prayer. I'll get that, you know, I'll print it out and we'll try to get it. And we'll do that. And maybe at the very beginning of our class, we'll do a prayer. And it's a prayer that was developed just about maybe 20 years ago at the school level. And all schools say that same prayer every morning, from kindergarten up to grade 12. Very common, yeah. And I'll teach you that prayer. It's just a very, very simple prayer. And we'll memorize it, and we just say it like the Lord's Prayer. Okay? Sugapi? And then maybe we'll have another undertaking and we'll do O Canada in Blackfoot. Would you like to do that one? No?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Sing O Canada in Blackfoot. Oh, kita sin. No good. Anyways, I gotta learn it. Okay, so I'll end there. Any more questions before I sign off? Zach,
Just
Gabriel,
just
Jocelyn, Kateri, everybody, thank you for joining me again. Same time next week.
okay.
So
Julius, I have one question. I have
okay,
one question. Just the end part, the suffix of it systems for the
it's system sin.
sin. Okay, and that the ististum sin, that means what again? It's affecting the body?
Yeah, your body's sick. It's system sin. It means that your body's not well.
Okay.
Big sin is of course the scab.
The scab, yeah.
Big sin is system sin, meaning that the scabby sickness of your body.
Okay, sweet. That's what I need to do.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to also mention too, like those like dogs, they can be more than just like service dogs for the police. Like you have those dogs that are guide dogs for blind people,
right.
or the dogs who are like, they even have them for like people who have like autism or people who have seizures. So like those dogs, they can be healers too, like much like the horse can in a way, like the way it talks about that. The noun.
Canine dogs, and then there's some dogs that are kind of using for people to open up if you're autistic and that.
Yeah.
Get them off that shell and so forth. And
that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, man.
Okay. Ian, any questions? Everybody go like this. I want to see you. Go like this or like that. I'd rather see that. Go like this. Sugapi. The tear.
Sagapi.
Good.
Sugapi.
All right, like that. Yeah. Go from your chest here and go straight out like that. Sugapi. But it's not sugapi. You just go like this. You make matsugapi. The opposite. You go matsugapi. It's like you're throwing something away, right? But if it's sugapi, sugapi. Yeah. Okay, sugapi. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julius.
Yeah. You have a good week.
Yeah, you too, sir.